Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today we'll talk about the false consensus effect and why it threatens our relationships, personal, societal, business, all sorts. The false consensus effect has to do with how we misjudge others. Specifically, we think they agree with us more than they actually do. And that's why we find ourselves surprised when a colleague or loved one, someone, maybe society as a whole, disagrees with us. And this is due to what's called the false consensus effect, a false sense of agreement, consensus, where we tend to overestimate how much others actually agree with us. So it creates a sense of false, not real, alignment with others in our heads. And that can lead to a lot of conflicts, tensions, disagreements, lots of problems for us. That's why we really need to figure out where we might be having a false consensus experience in our minds with others, whether it's individuals or society as a whole, and address that. Let's talk about first real loved ones, romantic relationships. I've seen partners be shocked by how differently they feel about major things. For example, one partner may become more materialistic, money-oriented over time, while another may focus on self-awareness, mindfulness, fulfillment, these sorts of things. So contributing factors here can be people who are introverted and lack the desire to talk about themselves and their changes, and they don't notice how other people change. There might be separate friend circles for the different partners. There might be different hobbies, so they interact less in their personal lives than they used to. And if they have kids, they might be just spending time taking care of their kids and not really interacting with each other nearly as much as they used to. I've heard that from parents a lot. So they might not notice gradual change over time in their perspectives, values, and goals. Let's talk more broadly. What about society as a whole? There's research showing that false consensus effect can be really damaging for society as a whole and exacerbates social polarization and could causes people to spend more time in polarized communities, those filter bubbles you might have heard about, which further worsens the sense of a false consensus, the sense that other people agree with us, whereas many less people agree with us than we might actually think they do. Let's talk about this research more in depth. So the online presence of polarized communities, the research finds, encourages greater polarization because it facilitates our ability to share perspectives that are increasingly extreme because of this polarization. Back in the past, when we didn't have these online communities, we just know people in our neighborhood or friendship circle, and those would tend to be diverse people coming from different contexts and places. Whereas online, we can find interest-based groups that align with our ideology, with our personal values and beliefs, no matter how niche or extreme those groups might be, and they will reinforce our perspectives. And so we will tend to be more and more polarized if we focus on those online groups, including unloaded political issues that research finds, like the death penalty, like abortion, like teaching morality in public schools and gun regulation. People will tend to overestimate how much others agree with them on these things. Let's talk about another study which shows that the false consensus effect goes beyond politics and social issues into the divine. So relationships, for example, people believe that their personal opinions on social and ethical issues align with the opinions of God. So God, they believe, holds the same views that they do. Not likely, right? But that's what people believe. So false consensus is a cognitive bias, which is a mental blind spot that leads to poor decisions, life, financial, strategic, business, all per relationship issues. It causes people to follow their gut instead of best practices. And that's a problem. How do we identify false consensus? We really want to notice when we're surprised by others in a negative way, because it's hard for us to notice. It makes us feel uncomfortable because we are actually wrong about them. So our mental model of them was broken. Our intuitive gut reaction is to really flinch away from that feeling and ignore it because we want to retain our mental model of those other people the way we want them to be rather than the way that they actually are. To address false consensus, we need to take the uncomfortable steps of acknowledging and welcoming the feeling of unpleasant surprise. If we don't welcome it, we will just ignore it and it will flinch away, we will not face reality. So really consider past experiences and address issues in relationships before they suffer a major crisis, which often happens in relationships that then break. Let's talk about proactive strategies. One is looking backward. It's an important but reactive response. So looking backward means you notice that you're able to notice this feeling of surprise, and then you're able to work within yourself to address it and acknowledge that there's a false consensus, and you want to figure out how to overcome this false consensus, to actually have an accurate model of how other people think. But you can also look forward and debias by making predictions about the future, about how you think other people will think. So, these are the steps for looking forward. First, you make a prediction. Make a prediction about what the person you are thinking about will think on a certain topic, will feel about a certain topic, how they'll act on a certain topic. Then you want to write it down because you don't want to fool yourself. See whether it matches reality. Here's the step. So it's kind of like a scientific method. So you make a hypothesis, which is your prediction. You write it down. Then you conduct the experiment by figuring out what this person actually thinks about this topic, or how they feel, or how they will behave. And that is how you'll overcome the problematic belief set, because then you'll see whether it matches reality or doesn't. And then you can revise your perspective or see that it doesn't need to be revised. And you want to encourage other people to do the same thing to overcome this false consensus tendency. This can improve your own ability to address false consensus around issues and can help others fight against the false consensus effect if you suggest to them that they practice the same method of prediction of the future. All right, everyone. I hope you found helpful this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you check this out and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show and helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.